It's Wednesday, July 23rd, and we have got a special Wednesday bonus episode of 10-Minute Drill. We're going to talk about President Trump on judges. We're going to talk about a flap at the MLB All-Star Game and so many other things quickly today on 10-Minute Drill.
Everybody get up, get up.
The story of America is the story of an adventure.
I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you.
We are a nation under God, and I believe God intended for us to be free.
One of the great accomplishments of President Trump's first term was his effort to remake the federal judiciary with judges who respect the role of judges and respect the Constitution. And he's picked back up right where he left off in his second term, which has frustrated Democrats. We want to highlight a moment in a Senate Judiciary Committee hearing just last week.
Why are you doing this? This is outrageous.
This is a kangaroo court. That's what we have here,
This
Mr.
is
Chairman.
wrong. To violate your own rules without going by the mandates of the parliamentarian. This is unbelievable.
In this hearing, Senate Judiciary Chairman Chuck Grassley was trying to advance a number of nominees, including judges like Circuit Court nominee Emil Bove. Through that, the Democrats got very frustrated that they didn't have the opportunity to filibuster and shut the hearing down. Now, to speak in a hearing, you have to be recognized by the chairman, and Chairman Grassley did not recognize Spartacus Booker as he tried to yell over this voting process. Now, as you watch this, and we'll give you a second to hear some of the audio.
That I for so long, I've been so honored to be a part of. This is wrong, sir, and I join with my colleagues in leaving. This is a sham.
Vote.
This is wrong.
We'll report.
We're better than this.
Pratt to the floor. Now we'll have to vote.
So as you continue to see this, it will remind you, if you've got small children, of trying to have a dinner conversation while they're yelling about any number of things and pretending it's not happening, because otherwise you'll never get through your conversation. And that's what Chuck Grassley and Senate Republicans did here in the Judiciary Committee, advancing these nominees despite, first, Senate Democrats walking out of the hearing, and then Spartacus Booker trying to shout over it, which at some point, Spartacus will probably recognize that he is simply white noise, not making a difference on anything. We wanted to highlight a few of the incredible nominees President Trump has begun his second term with. First, his very first nominee, Circuit Court nominee for the Sixth Circuit, Whitney Hermandorfer, the head of strategic litigation for the Tennessee Attorney General's office, leading some of his biggest fights. She previously clerked for Justice Samuel Alito, Brett Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett. Jen Mascott, nominated to the Third Circuit, taught at both Catholic University and George Mason, an administrative law expert, separation of powers expert, clerked for Justices Thomas and Kavanaugh. And then Eric Tung, nominated to the famed Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. He's clerked for Justices Gorsuch and Scalia. So again, President Trump's picking up where he left off, nominating incredibly effective, long-storied stalwarts who are originalists, who focus on the meaning of the Constitution as written, and they will be incredibly valuable members of the court for decades to come. If you're on social media, you might have noticed in the last few weeks that Gavin Newsom has adopted a new strategy, particularly from his press office social media account. Axios reported on it, saying how trolling became a strategy for Gavin Newsom. One example of this, late last week, the Newsom press account posted a video of the infamous now Coldplay concert event where a CEO and his head of HR who were having an affair were caught on the kiss cam. The Newsom press office changed that to be President Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. But users on social media quickly pointed out that Gavin Newsom famously blew up his own marriage by having an affair with a subordinate. You have to wonder if the staffers running this account Googled their boss before jumping into this. But not every meme is meant to be used for everything. While Gavin Newsom is focused on podcasts and social media engagement, though, he's taking a lot of heat back home for the continued delays in the rebuild after the LA wildfires.
What's happened with that process? You've submitted all your paperwork.
We submitted our permits in April. We were approved early June. We were ready to build. We have to now grade our land, and that's been an ordeal. We've been waiting 6 weeks for that permit, but we've been told multiple things.
His accounts have even taken to attacking victims of this wildfire and calling them things like C-list celebrities. He also has taken heat in the last week after the Department of Transportation and the Trump administration announced they were canceling certain grants for the California high-speed rail project. We have talked about that quite a bit here. Just to reiterate, the California high-speed rail project is the definition of political boondoggle. The first money was spent on that 10 years before I was born. It will not have any track completed until I am in my 80s, and right now, not one single track has been laid. So again, that's what governing means to Gavin Newsom. One theme that we wanted to highlight today was how Democrats talk about rural America. You'll remember last week, as Republicans were talking about their bill to codify DOJ cuts, which included NPR and PBS, Democrats suddenly raised major concerns that this would hurt rural America who lean on NPR and PBS. But here's Missouri Senator Eric Schmitt responding to that.
Saying that defunding CPB will somehow prevent Americans from receiving emergency alerts is demonstrably not only fear-mongering, but not true. Simply put, we don't need to subsidize left-wing propaganda in order to keep Americans safe.
So again, you have to have never spoken to a person in rural America if you think they get their news from NPR and PBS. And as Senator Schmitt noted, those alert systems are not reliant on NPR or PBS's infrastructure at all. Another area where Democrats pretend to care about rural America is healthcare. One of their biggest concerns about cutting fraud, waste, and abuse in Medicaid was that it might hurt rural America. But again, Republicans included a $50 billion rural health fund to cover that, which took out the Democrats' main attack against it. Again, one of our favorite examples of this is the fact that Kamala Harris picked Tim Walz as her vice presidential nominee, thinking that he would appeal to rural America, which again reminds everyone of the fact that they have no idea what anyone in rural America thinks or feels about anything. Last week, the Major League Baseball All-Star Game was held in Atlanta, Georgia. You'll remember that a number of years ago, Major League Baseball moved the All-Star Game out of Atlanta after false reports that an election law they had passed was a voter suppression law. After that All-Star Game was moved, and after this giant political kerfuffle, Georgia saw the highest voting participation in their history. This election law was not about voter suppression. It was about voter ID and things that made voting more secure, making it easier to vote and harder to cheat. Democrats took a lot of heat for much ado about nothing, with people like Joe Biden who had called it Jim Crow 2.0 or even Jim Eagle, which turned out to be nothing more than concerned trolling and attempts to scare people. But last week, at the press conference around the All-Star Game, a reporter asked this question.
What happened to being relentless with our voices, and why are we in Atlanta when this law is still on the books? And it is a dangerous situation to be a journalist in Atlanta because Atlanta has detained the most journalists by ICE.
I believe the question was a political question.
So we can't blame Pat McAfee for not understanding the politics of this issue, but for this reporter to not know what has happened since that law passed is pretty egregious. But again, the Georgia election law made it easier to vote and harder to cheat, and good on MLB for learning from the last few years and moving the game back to Atlanta, which was a huge success. One of the themes we've talked about quite a bit here on 10-Minute Drill is the role regulation and absurd rules and bureaucracy play in keeping Americans from being able to build anything. We want to highlight an op-ed from our friend James Burnham on this in the Wall Street Journal. Trump's NEPA reform will get America building. Why is American infrastructure so shoddy compared with much of the developed world? The U.S. is one of the wealthiest nations the world has ever seen, and it has the most dynamic economy. Yet, Americans don't have the sort of gleaming transportation systems that crisscross many Asian or European countries. So what James is describing there is NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act. I'd recommend you read this piece in the Wall Street Journal, and I'd close with this. Great companies die when they stand still, and nations are no different. America will remain the greatest country on earth only if our builders have the freedom to build. The Trump administration's new NEPA policy gives them a chance to do just that. So again, this is complex, dense policy, but it's incredibly important in understanding how President Trump has an opportunity to make the economy work better for everyone and make it easier to build things in America again. That is all the time we have for today. Thanks so much for turning into this irregular, very exciting bonus episode. Please tune in tomorrow for another full-length episode. Have a nice day.